It all began on an ordinary Wednesday, one of those nights when the exhaustion of the past weeks dragged me to the couch even before the clock struck 9 p.m., and I already felt defeated. It was the fourth week Clara, our new nanny, was taking care of Alice, my 8-month-old daughter, and just that night I decided, almost on impulse, to leave the audio mode of the baby monitor on my cell phone since I was working in the makeshift office and didn't want to climb the stairs at every little sound. I always had bouts of guilt for not being more present, for dividing my time between meetings and deadlines and the little girl who seemed to only sleep, nurse, and look at me with those eyes demanding the world. The sound on the monitor was almost hypnotic, a low buzz mixed with Alice's light breathing, punctuated by the occasional rustle of fabric, creaks from the house, and sometimes a muffled noise coming from the Nanny, reading stories in the room. It was shortly after 10 when I heard something strange, an irregular whisper. At first, I thought Clara was talking on the phone. After all, who hasn't taken advantage of the silence of someone else's sleep for a midnight vent? But the words cut the air with a sharpness that paralyzed me, because they weren't addressed to anyone on the other end of the line. Clara spoke softly with Alice, but said things that didn't make sense. If they knew no one would sleep in this house, the parents don't tell everything, my little one, and not everything that seems safe is. Loose, fragmented phrases, and I there, with chills down my spine, unable to decide if they were just the ramblings of a tired woman or something worth investigating. I stayed still for minutes, the monitor close to my ear, feeling my hands sweat, fear mixed with guilt, that sensation of betraying the trust of someone who takes care of what I have most precious. I thought of turning it off, pretending I heard nothing, but courage or paranoia was stronger. I discreetly started saving the audios from the app, a trick I learned after reading reports from other mothers on the internet. The next morning, Clara smiled at me as always, made Alice's porridge, and went to the park as usual. I spent the day obsessed with every detail I would hear at night. It was just an unease I repeated to myself, until the moment I listened to the files and heard something even more disturbing. A male voice whispering very close to the microphone, and then Clara in a harsh tone saying, "Not here, not with her." My routine became a loop of tension. I left the monitor recording in presence mode every time Clara was with Alice, and began noticing small changes in my daughter's behavior. Smiles when she should cry, restrained crying in my lap, that strange gesture of protecting herself when someone knocked on the door. I arranged a meeting with the agency, researched backgrounds, joined mothers' WhatsApp groups where I found rumors, almost vague, almost urban legends about nannies who frequently change cities and adopt other names. Clara's past was stained with shadows, incomplete institutional records, old addresses unanswered. The more I investigated, the more I felt the presence of something dark lurking behind the perfect routine we pretended to live.
The next night, the recording brought an even scarier revelation. Clara murmured names of children, not one, nor two, but many, as if reciting a list. I called Lucas, my husband, and together we listened to those audios, the anguish tightening in our throats with every new secret whispered into the darkness of the room. Clara spoke about an old house, promises she couldn't fulfill, fears that haunted her since childhood. Weeks were needed to collect clues, seek former employers, identify patterns of escape and destruction in the homes she had passed through. The story grew and spiraled out of control. It no longer fit into audios, reports, nor in the explanations we gave to Alice's anxiety or our own nightmares. The police finally intervened when, one night, the monitor recorded Clara saying, "Now it's my turn to be heard. You owe me this," followed by Alice's "try crying" and the sound of doors slamming shut with force. The developments came in waves. Testimonies from former families, altered records, and an ending that taught me the power of small machines watching daily life. What I discovered about Clara, her real name, and the disturbing sequence of episodes in homes across the country made me rethink what it means to trust, to watch, and to protect what we love most. It was not a material inheritance, nor a comfortable answer to offer my siblings, the police, or the press. It was a brutal dive into the primordial fear of being deceived by those we put inside what we imagined to be home. Sleeping was never the same again after that. And Alice grew up hearing scattered stories and explanations about invisible nannies and about mothers unable to really turn off the monitor, not from the wall, but from the heart. The morning after that night, when my daughter cried in a way that I no longer recognized, I sat by her bed with my laptop open and my heart beating so hard that each beat seemed to push back and forth in time. My maternal instinct, which I believed trained, tried to rationalize, to assure that all that fuss was just paranoia or a fear inherited from other generations of tired women. But there was something in the way Alice looked at me, a mixture of relief and fear. A childish desire to trust unreservedly and, at the same time, a primordial alert, as if she already knew that the adult world is made of half-closed doors and hushed conversations. I called Lucas, asked him to come home earlier, and invented an excuse for Clara. I said we'd have a sick relative visiting, that she would be released earlier that Friday. The relief on her face was quick, almost imperceptible. A relaxing of shoulders accompanied the smile of someone who wouldn't have to pretend for anyone. When she left, I went back to the monitor and heard each recording again, now with headphones, noting times and pauses, trying to identify each voice, each breath, each sound of the house in the background. I gathered courage and called the agency. I demanded a dossier of all the homes Clara had worked in. The woman on the other side said, without hesitation, that Clara was well evaluated, but would send the history as soon as possible. Lucas was the first to notice I was on the verge of collapse. He took my laptop from my hands, read the transcripts, noticed the obsessive way I scribbled down Clara's ambiguous phrases, and suggested that before involving any authorities, we should talk to a friend in the police force. We needed context, calm, a strategy, or we'd end up like another family destroyed, not by real danger, but by fear of it. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But it was a harsh sleep full of dreams mixing Alice, Clara, and unknown women whispering names into the ears of sleeping babies.
The police officer came Saturday afternoon, patiently looked at each recording I brought, asked us to tell everything, the vague impressions, smells, habits, anything signaling unusual behavior. He noted Clara always asking to take Alice to the park alone, avoiding eye contact with other parents, frequently changing phones. He went to her apartment, already warned of vague data about past records switched, different surnames on contracts, and truncated messages in mailboxes. Sunday came, and nothing. Clara didn't show up, didn't call. Her cell phone was out of service. Late afternoon, we received a police call. Clara had been a nanny in at least 5 cities in the last 6 seasons, always replacing someone urgently, always staying less than 6 months in homes, almost always disappearing overnight. In all cities, a strange coincidence? Abrupt changes in behavior of children under her care. Parents reporting insomnia in little ones, episodes of recurrent night terrors, and, in 2 cases, investigations opened and archived at the request of families who preferred silence to probable exposure in local press. Lucas held my hand as I read the email for the 3rd time. A chill ran down my spine. I thought irrationally of the nights I handed Alice to Claire without hesitation, just because I needed some hours of sleep. What would have happened if we hadn't doubled our attention after the monitor revealed more than cries and babble? I felt anger at myself for blind trust and sadness for the child I used to be, always taught to believe the best of people. On Monday morning, Clara was found at a bus station 4 cities away. She was trying to board a bus to the countryside without telling anyone, with documents and a name different from what she had presented to the agency.
In her bags, toys, children's books, and letters, not sent, all written to boys and girls she had worked with over the years. The local police arrested Clara for investigation. She didn't resist, just held a calm and attentive gaze, almost sweet. There were no signs of mistreatment on Alice, nor evidence of physical violence. But the police discovered old records of child therapy and their reports of excessive closeness or crossed emotional boundaries in other cities. Alice relearned to sleep in her own room, but never again accepted closed doors. I gradually put aside the monitors, but never completely turned off the vigilance instinct. Months later, they asked if we had forgiven, if we had moved on. I answered that forgiveness is a luxury for those who never thought they looks. Therapy began slowly. First for Alice, playful sessions with the psychologist with a soft voice who looked at me more than at her, as if trying to decipher the blurred lines between mother's fear and childhood trauma. Alice was reluctant, drawing shaky little houses and scribbling circles around small curled-up figures in the corner of the page. They tried to induce her to talk about Clara with puppets, dolls, make-believe games. Nothing very explicit emerged, but the words that escaped cut me like blunt knives. It was a secret. The lady cries, "Can't tell mommy." I was advised to have patience, but deep down, I knew part of what Clara had sown there would grow in silence for years yet. Meanwhile, local journalists began probing. No formal accusation had been made, but the police thought families willing to talk. My name appeared in mother forums, school lists, whispered supermarket conversations. Lucas nearly exploded one Saturday when he heard a mother at the playground whisper, "Is that the mother of the nanny's little girl?" The look of pity, even disguised, accompanied us since then, a second ghost in the routine we tried to rebuild. The case against Clara dragged through bureaucracy because there was no proof of physical abuse, and the recordings, sometimes interpreted as delusions of a lonely woman, other times as warning signs of emotional risks, weren't enough to constitute a crime legally. Some families before us gave phone statements, almost always hesitant, marked by the same doubt, protecting their own privacy or sacrificing modesty and allowing others to know what could have happened. It was a network of silence and fear that trapped everyone in a kind of gray morality, where everyone tried to measure the cost of their own embarrassment. In the following weeks, I mentally revisited every gesture, every word, every time I handed my daughter to that strange lap. I obsessively asked myself where I failed. Was it omission, inattention, or just the ordinary desperation of keeping a job while trying to be a mother? The guilt became a habit, a silent weight I carried over the months. One day, in a pile of Clara's old papers left behind, I found a yellowed letter from an institution in the interior of Minas Gerais. It was a canceled adoption evaluation dated almost 20 years earlier. At the bottom, a social worker reported, "Candidate presents psychiatric history compatible with recent manifestations of dissociation, episodes of fragmented speech, reluctance to expose real emotions in interviews, as well as vague and disconnected references to past events involving childhood losses." Only then did I realize with my whole body that woman who gently entered my life was never entirely here nor anywhere. And what remained of her was a distant echo of old grievances passed from house to house. I started searching for previous families, writing letters, searching social networks, calling small towns where Clara worked as a caregiver. I received suspicious replies, polite refusals, or forced silences. But slowly, some mothers answered. One reported her son began crying every night at the same hour, having recurring nightmares involving a sad lady. Another said that after Clara's passage, the boy never hugged anyone outside the family again. There was a common pattern, not injuries, not explicit violence, but an invisible fissure, as if Clara planted, unknowingly, a hard-to-name shadow in every child. Lucas and I, weakened by the routine of investigation and unease, forgot to look at each other. For months, our conversation boiled down to logistics, appointments, procedures, and silences filled with fear of what might still emerge. Alice seemed to grow up too fast. She became reserved with strangers, but also developed a sharp intuition about who was trustworthy. As much as we wanted to protect her from the world, we realized that no fortress is complete against fear, and that piece of pain, isolated behind infant tears, would only dilute over time. Among the ruins of routine, I tried to turn that bitter inheritance into a lesson. I organized mother's circles, attended lectures on child mental health, anonymously gave interviews telling our story so other families would know what to look for, what to avoid, how to break a cycle of silence and shame. Maybe one day, Alice will read this account, written between sleepless nights, school meetings, and therapist appointments, and understand that in the end, all I could give her was this warning. Trust is a daily construction, but no one is shielded from the small horrors hidden in human fragility. There's no absolute redemption in these stories. Clara was diagnosed, according to the final report, with severe psychiatric disorder, moving between homes, incapable of creating roots or healthy attachments. She served a short sentence and followed an invisible journey, perhaps a new city, a new name, a new beginning. Lucas and I made pace, learned to name our limits, unlearned paralyzing fear, and at night, even with all alarms turned off, I still sometimes wake up with the echo of that monitor recording, "Now it's my turn to be heard." Years later, Alice learned to sleep alone, but never wanted to hear stories told by people who couldn't say, looking into her eyes, where she came from and where she intended to go. I became the kind of mother who never confuses vigilance with love. I learned that trauma is not only a wound in the present, but a long conversation with the fear I inherited from the women before me, and that if I can't avoid it from my daughter, at least I will name it, face it, cross it by her side, silently rowing until the first ray of trust lights our days again.